We are all human, and unfortunately, we see that Jews who may never have thought this way, who are ashamed of and curse the Netanyahu government, may become targets today and tomorrow. Absolutely. Because public polls don't say so, unfortunately, they show that the majority support the Netanyahu government. It's very sad, but they
can't shield themselves. I would expect that, but they should at least be able to say they disagree. I
suppose I'd already said that. You really don't want to be part of this shame. You don't want to be involved in this genocide. Meanwhile, Trump is making important statements. Well, as you know, Russia's violations continue, and with these violations, Trump says that NATO can now shoot down Russian planes. If it spreads to other countries, no, we entered their airspace by mistake, we had no such intention, etc. Even if they say, no, we entered their airspace by mistake, we had no such intention, and today, there were harsh statements from Poland about this. They support those statements. He is speaking with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Let me briefly talk about what he said so that we can start discussing this topic in the second part. Because today, in his address to the UN General Assembly, American President Donald Trump, said, "The easiest way to end this war is to end it. I trusted my relationship with Putin, but this is war. You never know what you're going to face. He disappointed me." He said something like, "I haven't resolved that yet." Zelensky also said, "We will brief Trump on the battlefield. We have good news and we will also talk about security guarantees. More pressure and sanctions are needed on Russia. We want to discuss how to prevent Europeans from buying Russian oil and gas." And this is what American President Trump said in response. If Russian aircraft continue to enter NATO airspace, NATO countries should strike them. This is a truly important statement. By the way, he also says this. Well, he has very close ties. I think Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán will abandon the oil purchases, he says. I hope he doesn't ask for the same from us in his meeting with President Erdogan. I don't know exactly what happened in Denmark, he says. Denmark airport was also closed yesterday evening due to violations observed in its airspace, and Trump was also asked whether he supported the downing of the Russian plane. He replied that it depends on the circumstances. Well, there are indeed hot developments taking place here as well. Especially with the developments on the ground and not getting what he wants from Putin. Does Trump want NATO to be more actively involved, right, Professor? Will such a thing happen? It's
moving towards it step by step. We've stated this before. We've discussed the Russia-Ukraine war many times. Russia's goal is to advance deep into Europe from Ukraine to break the strategic siege against itself. In other words, if I can reach an agreement with Russia on this issue, we need to make strategic concessions. Otherwise, look at Russia, just imagine this. Europe, from Finland, Sweden, all the way to Crete. From Crete to Cyprus, Israel, and now, look, they've hit Iran. It's no coincidence that Iran is being attacked. So, if Iran becomes destabilized and falls under Western control, Russia is surrounded from the west and south. Russia saw this. That's why the arguments Russia initially put forward for the Ukraine war were just excuses. So, what was it? Can it join NATO? It can't. We've said many times that Ukraine can't join NATO. Europe won't even admit such a problematic area to the European Union. There are Nazi battalions, or Ukrainian army battalions. So, will 2 battalions of Russia now pose a threat? Therefore, we understand that a strategic war has begun. Look, in this strategic war, Russia, its eyes are on Ukraine, advancing from Poland towards Germany. From a military perspective, this axis has begun to take shape. Therefore, there is a nature of wars. The nature of wars is as follows. Wars begin, reach their peak. Then they fade. In other words, after a certain period of time, a war either fades or what happens? It spreads. There are 2 rules. In other words, it spreads. From the very beginning, I've said it here many times that this war will spread northward. Where is it taking place? In Europe. Why north? Because the main strategic approach axis is from the south, the war must spread north to prevent possible attacks on this approach axis. So, strategic wisdom, well, World War II is an archive. It's important. It already says this. It's also doing this in that direction. So why are the Russians sending drones and such? You see, 2 Russian UCAVs are entering Poland. The guys immediately launch F-16s. So, it's a countermeasure. The reason for this is, Russia is actually testing European countries right now. They're testing their reactions. And at this point, Europe is behaving incorrectly. Let me tell you from here. So, you're going to have 2 or 3 drones enter. They'll launch F-16s, F-35s, or something. These are not correct. So, it becomes clear that your low-altitude air defense systems are weak. Look, Europe's low-altitude air systems are weak. So, now, we're going to have to deal with them. Let's go back. As you know, the steel dome consists of 3 layers: low altitude, medium, and high. Which altitude has the most weapons systems? Low altitude.
Low, Professor. I
Can't even name them here. So many systems have come online. Laser systems, electromagnetic systems, systems like the Dragon, which fires bullets, combined systems. In other words, systems like the Hizar, which fires both ammunition and missiles, and the Gurs, which can use the A-type system. And indeed, I stated this in a broadcast today. Turkey is one of the most advanced countries in the world in terms of defense in low-altitude drone and robotic technology. Why? Because we now understand this. As we said, this war will continue. It will spread northward. But the characteristic of this business, sir, is robot wars, robotic wars, drone wars. Okay? We need to be ready for these drone wars. In this sense, Turkey is indeed testing them.